Watch out, Spider-Man. Give it up, Hulk. Here comes Franklin Richards. Franklin Richards, son of a genius. In stores now. Catch him before he's all grown up.
Aw, I thought I got to read the ad. Who did you get to replace me this time?
Oh, just the co-writer of Franklin Richards' Son of a Genius. He co-created that with Chris Iliopoulos. And he's also the writer of the Power Pack Ologies miniseries that started in 2005. You know, Marc Sumerak.
Oh, did we get him just to do the intro, or do you think he'd let us interview him as well? I mean, if not, maybe I could replace him for the interview.
No, Jeff. You can't. Welcome, dear listener, to our podcast. Jeff and Rick present Unpacking the Power of Power Pack,
where we journey through each issue of the all-ages rebooted Power Pack series from the 2000s while drinking beer.
Analyzing alternate, awesome, and amazing adolescent adventures, and absorbing alcohol.
I'm Jeff.
And I am Rick.
And welcome to our guest, Marc Sumerak. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Oh, thanks so much for having me, but I didn't get a beer.
Yeah, well, since we're doing this in the middle of the afternoon, I thought that it would be, and also because we're going to wrap this up quickly so you can go and pick up your daughter, I thought it would be inappropriate of us to suggest that we drink a beer beforehand.
Fair. Understood. Well, we'll have one in spirit together later.
That'd be really nice.
That'd be fantastic. Yeah. You actually are our second interview, and after June Brigman, and halfway through the interview, we mentioned that we do our podcast and we drink beer while we read through the comic books. She was a little upset at us and said, I wish you had told me that. I would have been drinking a Guinness out here while we're talking, which just made us both feel like, oh, we missed an opportunity to drink with June Brigman.
Yeah, we did. And she's a stout drinker, which is fantastic, so nice. Are we, so... What's your beers of favorite?
Oh, I'm actually a whiskey man.
Oh, so, good calls. Those are delicious.
I'm less on the beer and more on the whiskey.
Let's just get right in the interview because I know we've got a limited time with you. When you were a kid, what type of media did you like to consume, or what did you like to watch?
I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 78, so I was right at the heart of the Saturday morning cartoon world, where it was cartoons and toys and cartoons about toys. And comics about toys and comics about cartoons about toys. So my whole world was comics, cartoons, and toys. And it was right in the prime of Transformers and Star Wars and G.I. Joe and He-Man and Thundercats and all of that wonderful stuff.
Yep.
And that cross-media synergy that had really kicked up in the mid, beginning to mid 80s was really what drew me into comics in the first place. I remember I had read some comics. My older brother had read some Marvel comics, some DC comics, and I liked looking through his copies of stuff. And I remember buying a few random issues off the newsstand back in Cleveland, when I was a kid. But when I first really got excited about buying a comic book was when I saw a commercial on TV for a Transformers comic book. The Transformers toys had just started coming out. There was a cartoon that was starting, and there was this commercial on TV for a comic book. And I thought, wow, that must be important. I need to read that. And it's 1984, so I was maybe 5 or 6 at the time. I loved to read, and I think I kind of learned to read because of comics, because of my brother's comics. And I thought, man, this is going to be my comic. This is going to be the one that I read every month and get off the spinner rack at the local drugstore. Mm-hmm. And so that was really my gateway, those licensed books of the 80s, the Transformers and G.I. Joe and the Star comics that focused on licensed non-Marvel characters. And then I started seeing ads in those books for superheroes. And I remembered them from Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends. And I went, I know those guys. I want to read more about them. And that brought me more and more into the comic book world.
I was going to mention to you, too, that when you're listening off your, watching the TV shows, you've got your Transformers cereal there, you've got G.I. Joe on the screen, yet you missed the advertisements, which was the biggest part of that entire thing. But yeah, you see the commercials for these toys and the other pieces of pop culture at the time, it all ties together and draws you even further into its deep, deep web.
Oh, yeah. And it was beautifully synchronized. I mean, whoever was doing the marketing back then knew what they were doing. And you don't get that on the same level today because there's so many choices out there. You know, we're just blitzed from all angles by streaming media and different options that you don't really have the chance to settle in on just one thing. Back then, there were 3 channels to choose from. And cartoons aired at a specific hour, so they knew when to target you and how to do it. And boy, was it effective! I was their target market, and they got me.
Oh, we all were. I know that I've had this conversation before, where it's just like there's so much media available now that not everybody's on the same page. But back in the day, it's like, yes, you watched Cheers, yes, you watched these shows, yes, you were in front of the TV on Saturday morning from 7:30 until 11:30. Then you had a little break, and then at noon, Godzilla came on.
Yeah, and I was telling my daughter, who's 4.5, I was telling her about that the other night. We were watching something streaming on Disney Now on our Apple TV, and we had talked to her about the fact that, you know, maybe mommy and daddy could choose a show. And she wasn't so keen on the idea. And I said, you know, hon, we watch a lot of the shows that you love to watch because they're available whenever we want to watch them. I said, when daddy was a kid, if I wanted to watch a cartoon after school, I had to get home in time to watch it. And it wasn't ready to start when I got there. And I said, and if I wanted to watch something in the evening, it was whatever my parents wanted to watch because there were no kids shows on.
Yep. And you were lucky if you had a second TV. Yeah.
Yeah. I said, you've got it pretty lucky that, you know, we can sit down here and just choose a random episode of Go Away Unicorn whenever you want it. And yet, you know, you don't ever have to sit through one of our shows. So as a lesson, I think we made her watch a episode of the Great British Baking Show, and she ended up loving it. So, hey, we all win.
It's hard to not love that.
That's actually currently on our rotation of other things to watch. I got lucky somehow in my search for getting my 8-year-old to watch something that wasn't too insipid for us, and yet we could enjoy as well. She is a lover and a connoisseur of the Andy Griffith Show.
Oh, wow.
And I do not know how I lucked on that one, let me tell you. But yeah, the Great British Bake Off, also in our rotation. My daughter is confused by commercials.
Yeah.
She doesn't understand them. She's like, why are we watching this?
Yep. And it is really odd. You know, they'll get those maybe 1 or 2 second interstitials for another show on a streaming show, but it's not, you know, TV commercials as we remember them, as we know them from live TV. And yeah, it really is just a different digestion of content that's out there right now. It's very strange. I like it better, though, because I don't have to sit through lots and lots of stuff I don't want to watch to get to the things that I do.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, that is the nice part.
Sometimes the worst is like, I got to wait 5 seconds before I can skip the ad.
Yeah, right? It's terrible.
My life is so hard.
Or now it's like we get something like the new She-Ra show that comes on, and it's like you watch that, and it's like, I want to watch this all right now.
Yeah. Right.
And I want to share this with my daughter.
Yeah,
so yes, we can
culture.
watch everything.
Yep.
I had read an interview where you had talked about that you learned how to write comic books by being an editor. I know I'm kind of skipping ahead a little bit, but I want to kind of get into the power part of this. You like seeing how artists and writers have to be in step to really tell a story well. And I guess this kind of goes into what we were talking about, because back how we got into our love of all fandom things, it was kind of a mixture of what we're seeing on the TV, what we're reading, how the commercials, how the serial, how everything kind of interplayed. But you're kind of saying that being in step with the artist and writers, that helps to really tell a story. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Comics is such a collaborative medium. You know, the writer may come up with the story idea and write a script, but it's just words. You know, and until it's turned into pictures by an artist and then inked and then colored and then lettered, it's not a comic. You know, it is just a collection of ideas in word form. And I have seen comics that have absolutely soared to new heights because of the influence of a certain artist, whereas I have seen other comics fail miserably because a different artist was involved that didn't understand what the writer was going for. I have seen writers who have tried their hardest to get their message across, but it didn't quite work. And so when it was turned into pictures, it never quite clicked. And so you really have to understand the form of comics to understand how to collaborate between a writer and an artist. And I was very fortunate that I started my career on the editorial staff at Marvel, because that allowed me the chance to get to see some of the best writers and the best artists in the industry and how they worked together, how they collaborated, how their styles intermingled to create something new, and how Mark Bagley drawing a script by Brian Bendis was different than Mark Bagley drawing a script by Fabian Nicieza. Or Kurt Busiek writing a script for John Romita Jr. was different than Kurt Busiek writing a script for George Perez, because of relationships that they had, understandings of each other's strengths and styles of storytelling, and really the focus of what they wanted to do on each individual book. And I found that really fascinating. And so I made it my goal as both an intern and then an assistant editor and editor at Marvel, to really get a deeper understanding of what makes a script tick. And then when I eventually transitioned to freelance writing, I made sure that I applied all those lessons I had learned into my own work the best I could. Because why would you waste the chance to have that masterclass and not use it in your own process?
Yeah, there's no real reason to reinvent the wheel when somebody's giving you a car. So
exactly, and I mean, these guys know what they're doing, and there are differences and unique aspects to what each writer does and how they handle things. But at the core, what they're all trying to do is the same thing. We're all trying to tell a story in a visual method and combine words and pictures to tell, an interesting narrative. And methods may differ and styles of scripting may differ, but it's all the same basic goal. And when you put it all there and you look at all the different examples, you can find what's at the heart of the process and distill it down for your own use.
Did you ever find times when your writing was really influenced by your fellow creators using that same kind of method?
I think so. I can't think of a specific instance per se, but I mean, I think of when I go to a crowded page and I go, man, how would George Perez draw this? Or how would Kurt Busiek script this? Because they are masters at drawing a lot of characters or writing a lot of characters in a small space. Or I think, man, if I were writing this fight scene for John Romita Jr., how would I approach my script to get the message across to him? Because he's such an amazing storyteller. And, he does, you give him a few words and he turns it into a million pictures. And I think, what could I do to get that same effect from my artist in my script? And so, it's always in your mind, I think, but I never directly try to ape another writer's style per se. Even when writing a book with characters like Power Pack, where those characters have been established in the past, I never went into it and said, I'm going to write this like Wheezy. I said, I'm going to write this like Power Pack. Mm-hmm. And hopefully I was able to do so.
Well, great segue. When were you first exposed to Power Pack?
Back in the 80s. I think I was exposed to Power Pack pretty early in their life cycle. I honestly can't recall because I was always exploring new comics, throughout that era. I can't recall necessarily the exact first time I saw them. I very distinctly remember reading their crossovers with the X-Men. During the Mutant Massacre days and all of that, and that great Katie and Wolverine story and everything there. But I was aware of them before that. I knew who they were. I had probably picked up an issue or two of the series, but wasn't a regular reader. Because being a regular reader in the 80s sometimes was kind of hard. You had a newsstand. I had a local drugstore that had comics, but it wasn't a guarantee that they were going to get the next issue of the comic I read in. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know of any comic stores at the time. I didn't know a comic store was a thing back then. So to me, it was the luck of the draw. If I went in and I found a new issue of Star Wars instead of a new issue of Transformers, that's what I bought because I wanted to read a comic and it looked cool. So there was never a guarantee of consistency and continuity and an unbroken run per se. Then, I started to like the characters after that and continued to read. And then obviously, when we got to the point where I was writing the series, I went back and reread from the beginning and did all the research, to make sure I was fresh and up to date on all the continuity and the characters, even though there was a distinct effort not to necessarily lean on stories from the past.
How did you first get approached by Marvel to do this alternate Power Pack, and especially not pick up Power Pack again, but start a new alternate series? How did that come about?
Well, it was around 2000, and I had started doing some writing work for Marvel. I had done a series called Guardians, which was a riff on a very unpopular group of heroes at the time known as the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Who? Very unpopular.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. At the time, they were nobodies. And they want, I had pitched, when I was an editor, I had pitched the idea of taking a different approach with the Guardians name and doing something bizarre and different with a new group of characters. And when I had left Marvel's staff and went freelance eventually, I had an editor say, hey, remember that Guardians idea that you were, pitching around as an editor? Is there do you have any interest in pitching that as a writer? And I said, well, sure. That sounds like a lot of fun. I'd love to revisit that. And so I did, and it became a limited series. And I had then been doing some work on Marvel Age Fantastic Four, a few other titles here and there. And one of my editors had asked me to pitch some ideas of, different things we could do together. And one of those was Machine Teen, which was a limited series that I did. And another one was Power Pack at the time. And I don't remember if they said to me first that Power Pack was an option or if I said to them, because it was, at this point, 14 years ago. So It's a little blurry. But the discussion was had about Power Pack. And I had worked with Gurahiru, the Japanese studio that did the art for the Power Pack series, when I was an editor. I had worked with them on a couple of Fantastic Four stories in Marvel Double Shot and some other things, and we really loved their style. And so when their name came up as an option, I was really excited about the opportunity, because from the get-go, we kind of wanted to take an easy access Saturday morning cartoon kind of vibe with the new series, and they seemed like a perfect fit for that, for a modern audience.
You saying the Saturday morning cartoon feel that is how we've been describing it. Just perpetually describing it as Saturday morning cartoon. You just want to be in your footy pajamas, having your bowl of cereal, and just it's like you're sitting down watching the show. So yeah, you hit awesome. That on the head, man. That is amazing.
Well, thank you. I'm glad it worked, because that really was the intent. It was if I was watching an episode of Power Pack, with my kid, what would it be? And that's what the feel that I was going for at the heart of that series.
So do you remember who came up with the idea that it was going to be alternate universe and not a continuation?
I think it was more of just kind of an overarching marketing type of thing. I think at the time, the goal was to have an all ages branch of Marvel stuff. The Marvel Age and then what became Marvel Adventures series were doing well at the time, and they wanted to have books that would appeal to a younger audience and could be marketed as such. When I went into it, my goal was not to say, these are the alternate reality Power Pack members.
Right.
I was writing them as if they were the Power Pack. Mm-hmm. And eventually, over time, it just became like, hey, this is alternate Power Pack. This is not the core Marvel Universe 616 Power Pack, and I was fine with that. Mm-hmm. But you'll notice in the early issues, the goal was not to contradict what had happened before. It was to lightly reference it and move forward from that foundation. And that's why the kids were a little bit older, because time had moved forward in the Marvel Universe. Franklin Richards was a little bit older. And so we wanted to, address that. Should we ever tie it into the mainstream Marvel Universe, that would have been the logical age for them to be. And the characters that they were meeting at the time, whether it was in the crossover series or in the original series when it was the Fantastic Four, were usually themed appropriate to how they were at that time in the mainstream comics.
Right. Well, I think you did a fantastic job with it. I love the fact that it is just enough outside where it's not in continuity, but at the same time, if you squint your eyes, it's no problem seeing it in continuity. And I think you mentioned before about how you did your research and you went back and you weren't trying to reference anything in the past. I like how you took the characterizations that June Brigman and Louise Simonson created, kind of aged them up a bit and set them into a little bit different stone, if you will. I think you did a very nice job on that. But how did you come up with that process? How did you decide to make those slight changes?
It was a lot of back and forth, with the editors and just giving kind of my genuine gut feeling about, okay, this is the kind of kid that Alex was when he was in Power Pack 5 years ago in the comics. This is what we saw him slightly grow into in the 2000 miniseries.
Right.
Where would he have gone from there? And that was the train of thought, basically, is if I were a kid and these were the things I liked when I was 5, how would I feel when I'm 8? How would I feel when I'm 14? And how would those likes and dislikes and personalities grow and evolve with the different things that I faced along the way? And so it was just trying to put myself in their headspace and come up with a natural progression for the character. And you could have gone a million different ways. I don't think there was any wrong way per se, because the characters were, in their voices, I tried to stay true to who they were originally, but kids make different choices. Lots of kids start out the same and grow up in completely different paths, because of external influences. So we could have done a lot of different things with them, but I think the path we chose was a logical one for who they were and didn't divert too far from where the original stories stood. If you looked at the Julie in the 2005 series and looked at the Julie from the 1984 series, you could reconcile them. You could say, hey, Julie could have grown into that girl, and that was kind of the goal.
Well, I mean, you made sure that you didn't make it like, Jack was more acting like Alex or vice versa. Mm-hmm. That would have been very obvious. But I think you're right in moving them up just a little bit. For us, it kind of feels a little bit like they're a little bit more set in a stereotype.
Yeah, they're more of an archetype.
They're more of an archetype, I guess. Instead of being more of a rereading the original series as we are now and kind of walking through the issues, we're seeing sometimes inconsistencies with characters, but we also see very much a growth with the characters over a longer period of time, instead of just, here's what Alex is, and we know what Alex is going to be like in the rest of the shows. And same with Jack, too. I think you did a very nice job with that. But I was curious, did you ever have an opportunity, or did you ever have any conversations with any of the original creators of Power Pack about what you were doing?
I did not. I don't know if the editors did. I know at one convention, at one point, Louise Simonson and Walt Simonson were at the convention, and I had never met them, and I was a huge, huge fan. So I made sure to stop by and introduce myself to Louise and just say thank you. For all the inspiration and for years of great reading, not just Power Pack, but X Factor and so many other things that I loved.
Yeah.
Yep.
And just to say, I'm currently writing the 2005 series. I don't know if you've read any of it, but I just want you to know what an inspiration you are. And she was very appreciative and very kind. And that was the furthest interaction that we had. But it was a nice moment for me. It was one of those things that I still remember very fondly. And she probably, I don't know if she would or not.
Yeah.
It made an impact on me because to me, they're legends, they're heroes.
Oh, yes.
Walt has drawn, good God, every comic that I love, and Weezy has written and edited so many books that I care about. That how could you not thank them? If you had the opportunity,
you got to have your fan moment. That's great.
So I mean, we still have these. There are creators that I meet and creators that I, even though I've been in the industry for 20 years, I'm still a fan and I still love these people and I still appreciate what they've done. And it might be easier to reach out to them on Twitter nowadays because I work in the industry, but it's still something special. It's still something nice to be able to say thank you and to be able to show appreciation for what they created.
I think you've done a fantastic job of doing so. I don't know about for Jeff, but I think for me, reading through this, it feels a little bit like a love letter to the creators.
Yeah, I think that's kind of how it was intended, at least in my heart. I think I definitely had a little of that going on. I loved these characters. I loved the creators. I wanted to put my own spin on it, but give back in their direction as well and let the legacy continue.
Not to take anything away from any other creators that are out there, but I think that there is a difference between somebody who is a writer of comic books or a writer of fiction taking a property and moving it forward, and a fan that's going in and saying, I want to create something that I would like to read and that other fans would like to read. Mm-hmm. And I do think that you can see, kind of thinking about, we're talking about X-Men a little bit, looking at the current run and things that are happening on X-Men, they've got a lot of fans that are writing, and you can tell.
Right.
And there's a lot of good kind of respect back from the fan community going forward with it too.
I think there's got to be a balance, though. I think there's got to be a balance between professionalism and skill and understanding of the needs of the company, because these are company-owned characters, and there is a publishing agenda behind any book.
Right.
That agenda, first and foremost, is to sell copies.
Yeah.
But on a larger scale, it's to fit into the line and serve a purpose within the publishing overarch. And so I think you have to balance those things. It would be fun to just go in and geek out and write fan fiction all day.
Oh, yes.
And tell the stories exactly how I want to tell them. But there's also the realization that the stories may not serve that purpose within the larger venue of writing a comic book title. And so you have to balance. You have to balance professional writer and fan, and the people who can do it best are the ones that succeed in the business, I think. The people who really deeply love this stuff, but also understand the limitations and the requirements of the job.
Fantastic point, and you are correct. I am humbled by that. When you were setting this up, did you have an idea that you would be doing 4-issue runs or multiple 4-issue runs? How far did you plan this out, or how far did you and the editorial staff plan this out?
We had an idea that we would be doing 4 issues when we started out. We knew it was going to be a 4-issue limited series. There was hope that people would like it and we would do more, but we had no idea when we started. And so we did this first one. It got some good buzz to it. People seemed to enjoy it. And as we were working on that, I think numbers came in at a high enough, level that they said, hey, we want to do the next one, but we want to bump up the recognizability of the characters a little bit. So how about we do it as a crossover with another group of heroes to appeal to an audience, and that's when X-Men and Power Pack became a reality. And that was kind of the turning point where they said, okay, let's do more of these and make it kind of the gateway into the Marvel Universe for younger readers. So it was a way to give a point of view group of characters for young readers, that they could relate to and be the same age as and understand what they were going through, but also introduce the vast Marvel Universe to them, through those eyes. And that was what we were doing in those miniseries. So yeah, it led to Avengers and Power Pack Assemble, and then Spider-Man and Power Pack, and so on and so on and so on. For I think there were like 11 of them, I think, total. I didn't write all of them, but there were 11 of them. So 44 issues over the course of a few years, which was pretty fun.
More Power Pack content. We are not complaining. You've given us more stuff to do.
Yeah,
so.
Basically, we want more Power Pack. We absolutely love it.
Yeah, me too.
Hey, do you mind if I ask you about some design choices?
Yeah.
Okay. Big one I have is the Snarks.
Yeah.
So right off the bat, you have Scrat, and he's more of like a lizard man appearance than the classic,
right?
Snark kind of appearance. What was the reasoning behind that?
None that I know of. That wasn't a direction in the art, that I had written. I didn't say let's modernize the look of a Snark.
Okay.
That was a decision that was made likely by Gurahiru or perhaps by the editors. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But it was their interpretation. And I go back, when I get questions like that, it's a very good question. If you've ever read old issues of, Silver Surfer or Avengers that Mephisto is in. He has a very specific look. Mephisto has a very specific look. He's got the wild hair and the cape, and he looks kind of like a dashing devil. He's oddly kind of naked, but has a loincloth. He's a weird dude, but he's.
I call him the used car salesman of whoosh.
Right. Yeah, he's a very specific Marvel demon. But then, and I know I've invoked his name earlier, but then you read an issue where John Romita Jr. draws Mephisto. I think he's done it in Daredevil and some other places. And it is a totally different character. It is this weird kind of sketchy interpretation of a demon that looks like a lot more monstrous and totally different look. And it's the same character. It's, it's a different interpretation of the character by a different artist.
Okay.
And that happens a lot, throughout the Marvel Universe. You'll see one artist's take on a character versus another's. And I think just in this case, that's how Gurahiro interpreted the Snarks.
Okay, yeah, because I know in Day One they went back to the classic Snark appearance.
Yeah, and that was, I think, Corey Hampshire drew that.
Okay.
And I think that since that was so heavily tied into the early years of Power Pack, I think there was a lot of referencing done to make sure it, visually tied into those early stories as well.
Okay. And so like Power Pack costuming and everything, since it's altered a little bit, it was basically just artistic choice?
Yeah. It was just streamline and update. That was basically, the idea. It was take what works with the old costumes and just give them a fresh coat of paint for a new generation.
Yeah, well, it looked good. And all of the stuff that you guys did was just fantastic. I think Rick was touching on it earlier. The characters, it's like who they are. I love what you did with Alex.
Yeah, you made me like Alex. Which is
Alex is always like right at the beginning of our our first show. We talked about which are our favorite kids, which is our worst kid. And Rick was like, I don't like Alex, but then we got to these, and Rick's like, I really like Alex, and
Alex is a lot like Cyclops to me.
Yeah.
He's one of those characters that sometimes you go, I get what he's trying to do, but then sometimes you go, oh man, his methods, I just don't know with this guy. and I wanted, to bring a little more humanity and likability, to him as a teenage kid, because that is, I don't think that June Brigman and Louise Simonson were inaccurate with their portrayal of Alex at the age he was at.
Oh no, it works.
I think that was actually kind of perfect for a character that age, but that most kids that age aren't terribly likable, to be honest.
Fair point.
and so it was seeing him a little bit older and a little bit more matured and kind of handing that baton to Jack. You could kind of see where Alex learned from what he had done before and stepped into his own as a leader. And that's kind of what we were trying to show with his evolution, is he had gotten past some of that worrying and some of that, that general, I don't even know how to say it, but the personality quirks that he had that made you kind of steer away from him as a reader sometimes, even though you knew he was making the right choices as logically as a reader. I think we tried to see what we could do with him to bring him to the next evolution of his character.
It's kind of funny you mentioned the Cyclops reference. First of all, I am a Cyclops apologist as myself. I have one cosplay that I do, and that's Cyclops. But I think you get your chance to have that Cyclops Alex moment at the end of the X-Men and Power Pack. Mm-hmm. And you had that little bit of passing the baton of, here's how to be a leader and, don't make mistakes that I did kind of a thing. It's nice that you bring that up. I can definitely see what you're talking about there, though. Yeah,
there was definitely a reason that issue exists, with the two of them, is I saw a lot of parallels in them as leaders, and I wanted to kind of address that.
Well, that's writing our script for that episode coming up, I think, right there. Let me ask you a question about some of the Power Pack tropes, mainly kidnapping and constantly revealing their secret identities.
Sure.
I like how you kept that going, but why do those things keep happening to these kids?
Well, what we got to remember is superheroes get captured by supervillains all the time, and we don't call it kidnapping because they're adults.
Okay.
Fair enough.
It's no different than one of the Avengers getting taken hostage by Doctor Doom. It happens. It's superhero comics, and at the same time, there is a genuine fear, both for parents and for children, that someone is going to take them away from their comfort and safety. And so I think in general, in children's entertainment, it's a trope that is time tested because it works well. It plays upon a lot of emotions. And the bad guy taking you away, whether it's, Carmody the boogeyman, or if it's Mr. Sinister, it's still the idea of, I'm being taken out of my safe environment and I have to fend for myself and I might not make it out. What do I do? And that's something that relates.
This is something that we have talked about a lot too, kind of going back to the original series and when we collected, because we're about the same age, when we collected the original series as kids. And other people were like, oh, why are you reading that? That's a kid's book. And yet we looked at him and said, yeah, but have you read this? Because this is dark. Yeah. These are kids that are dealing with a lot of the same things that superheroes are.
It's kids in a book. Yeah. It's not a kid's book.
Right. And I think that
exactly.
touches,
there's a big distinction.
Yeah, that touches on exactly what you're talking about there.
Well, and there are so many good movies and good animated series that star kids as their lead, but it doesn't mean that they're just aimed at children, for their audience. I think luckily, the views of these things are a lot different than they were in the 80s. It's not quite as pigeonholed as it used to be. However, that we did live through the, comics are for kids idea, and it was tough to break people of that. Now, luckily, most people see comics as literature, which is great. But that wasn't always the case. Right. And when you all of a sudden have got a comic starring kids, that makes it even more of a baby thing.
Right.
And so, it was a tough thing to beat. We always like to say that all ages means all ages. It doesn't just mean kids. It means it's appropriate for kids, but that everyone can enjoy it. And that's how we tried to write it.
When you did the setups for these miniseries, speaking of little tropes that you've got for the series itself, was the focus always going to be that there was going to be kind of one child that was going to be front and center for each issue? Or because I saw that in the first miniseries, but I saw it continuing throughout the run as well. Was that a conscious choice, or was that just a side effect of the writing?
It was a conscious choice. It was definitely a conscious choice for the first series because we knew we had 4 issues and we had 4 team members. And I treated that first series as the pilot. I wanted it to be like, let's meet these kids. Let's give them each a big moment to shine. Let's give them each a dilemma. So in that first issue, you've got Katie and the problem of revealing their identity. In that second issue, you've got the choice of Alex and leading responsibly. Do I do I stay home with my family and make the right choice, or do I follow my heart and go out with this girl?
You go out with the girl.
And how do I balance these things? In the third issue, it's a Jack issue, and it's Jack and the Fantastic Four, and it's all kinds of ridiculous nonsense that Jack gets himself into because that's what Jack does, and then actually finding a way out of it.
By the way, congratulations on finding Jack's soulmate in Johnny Storm. That is perfect and yet frightening at the same time.
Oh, so many parallels.
So many. We call them the hair gel boys.
Yes, I love it. And then you've got that last issue, where Julie is debating whether or not she wants to keep doing this, which I found kind of funny that later on in Julie's superhero career in the mainstream Marvel Universe, they kind of picked up on that with the Loners series, where Julie left being a member of Power Pack and went off on her own to do her own thing in LA. I kind of, smiled a little bit to myself because I went, well, maybe that's because they saw that story. I don't know. But then when we got another 4 approved, I went, well, that makes sense to continue to a certain extent. Just like in normal episodic television, certain episodes take a character and push them to the forefront. I figured from that point on, we don't need to do an issue or an episode or an issue that is just about one character primarily. But if one character comes to the forefront slightly during those decisions in each issue, it gives them each a chance to shine. And with those 4-issue structures, it made sense. So I continued to try to make sure that there was a thematic character in each issue.
Okay, well, speaking of the issues, where would you like to see this going into the future? Would you like to see your franchise continue, your universe version, or go back to doing the original version or anything? Would you like to see more Power Pack exist?
I would love to see more Power Pack exist. The likelihood that they're going to say, hey, let's, restart this version of Power Pack that has been, on the shelf for 6 years now is slim. So I don't expect that. What I would love to see is more Power Pack in the mainstream Marvel Universe. I'd love to, the kids are out there. Julie just appeared in some issues of Runaways in the last couple of months.
Yep.
Alex is off saving the universe with the Remains of the Future Foundation as Professor Power.
Yeah.
And which I think is awesome. Right there, that's a Power Pack follow-up series waiting to happen. And then, we've seen Jack and Katie occasionally. They were, I think, during a recent crossover event, they had their own, little story with Julie.
Right.
But
that was in Civil War.
Yeah, during Civil War II. But there's not been a lot of use of those two characters. I would love to see more of them down the road. They're always a welcome addition to the Marvel Universe. The problem is, what is the hook that makes the book sell in the level that it needs to? Because again, comics don't survive as long as they used to. Even the best book with the best talent, sometimes you're lucky if you get 6 issues out of it in today's market. And so when you launch a book, you got to know that it's at least going to hit with an audience. And I think the stuff is there to make Power Pack do that, but it's a matter of making sure that everybody upstairs who signs the checks and stuff is aware of its viability as well. And I think once they find the right combination to make that work on a continued basis, it'll happen. I don't think Marvel is ever looking to bury characters. They've got so many of them, and they want to use them in cool and exciting ways. It's just finding the right way for today's audience.
We're trying our best to sell it to the masses with our little podcast.
Well, it's appreciated.
We love it. I was a little amazed when we started this off because we threw this out there. We're like, we're going to have a couple people listen to us.
Yeah.
We got a pretty good hit early on, and people saying, oh my God, I love Power Pack. I miss them. And oh my gosh, there is some fans out there that are still clamoring for Power Pack.
Wonderful.
And the fans that are clamoring for it are strongly clamoring for it. There are people that are just
awesome,
still Power Pack fanatics.
We're going to shift gears a little bit because
sure,
we got to know about Franklin Richards. I mean, the fifth Beatle here. And the way you used him with Chris Eliopoulos, Franklin Richards, son of a genius. We love these.
Oh, great.
We absolutely love these. They're fun. We asked you this before, but we really hope you don't mind that we are using these for our cold opens.
Yeah, it's great.
How much, when you and your friend Chris were co-creating this, how much did you design this as a slight homage to Calvin and Hobbes?
Well, it's funny. I came into Franklin Richards a little bit later in its development. Chris had come up with the concept and had pitched it to Marvel, and Marvel liked it a lot, and they thought, yeah, this is a lot of fun. And since Chris was at the time, primarily known as a letterer of all of Marvel's titles, and he lettered everything. He was amazing, and he had done some books of his own, Desperate Times, I believe it was called, where he had done the writing and the art for it for Image. They wanted to pair him up with a co-writer to, both help his schedule, because he was, again, lettering every one of Marvel's books at the time, it seemed like, and also, just to make sure that they had the right feel for it. So they teamed the two of us up, and we worked really well together. And, I will always, always, always claim that Chris is the mastermind behind that series. It would not exist without him and without his genius ideas. And he has gone on, he does those Ordinary People Change the World books with Brad Meltzer now. It's, I Am Abraham Lincoln and I Am Gandhi and all those little square-bound books you see in every school book fair in the world. So he's gone on to do amazing stuff, and well-deserved, because he's a fantastic cartoonist. But yeah, I mean, we came in, and obviously there is, just in his style, a certain connection that people see Calvin, but it wasn't an effort to necessarily homage Calvin and Hobbes as much as it was to pay homage to classic comic strips of yore. Right. There's a lot of Peanuts in there. There's a lot of Calvin and Hobbes. There's a lot of just simple, quick panel-to-panel fun.
Yes.
We wanted to tell easy stories in a couple of pages that you could read with your kid and then put down. And it's a very formulaic. Franklin finds a device. He gets in trouble. He goes to Herbie. Herbie cleans up his mess. Everybody's happy. I mean, that's every story. We did like 80 of them, and that's every story. But
Herbie shrinks him back down to size, a little bit smaller than before.
The fun is in the variation. The fun is in, how does he do it this time?
Yeah.
And, it's kind of like reading a newspaper comic strip. It's, that Lucy's going to pull away the football, but what's going to make it funny and special this time? And that's where we go back to with those.
Actually, Jeff brought up a good point. He's been noticing in the ones we've been reading that you've been making Franklin Richards smaller and smaller and smaller in each one. I don't know if that was supposed to be that way, but like every one where he shrinks or his size changes, they always bring him back just a little bit smaller.
I don't know if he intended that or not.
You're slowly taking him away from the universe.
I just thought it was funny. It was like, he grows a little bit. No, let's keep him the same size.
Yeah. I think it is funny, though, when you look at any book, whether you look at Gurahiru's first issue of Power Pack and their final issue of Power Pack, or you look at Chris's first Franklin strip and his last Franklin strip, there's always that little bit of learning curve of the characters and finding your footing. And heck, as a writer, it's the same thing. I mean, my first issue of Power Pack is so different than how I wrote the kids in my last issue of Power Pack, because I had grown with them and I had grown to understand them better over the course of having them live in my head.
I know Jeff just finished doing a total reread of the entire entire run. It seems like there's a little bit looser interpretations of the characters and the situations, and just kind of more of a little bit of a slapstick in a good way of dealing with the situations around them, which I think is kind of part of that growing process as well. Just really having fun with the characters.
I think we were having fun with the characters, and we wanted the characters to have fun with each other.
Right.
Because one of the things that we constantly tried to remind ourselves is, yes, they're heroes, but they're also kids.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the 80s series is that it was, like you said earlier, it was a very serious and dark tone. And a lot of the stuff they went through in those books, you could almost forget that they were kids because they were dealing with hard stuff.
Yes.
And we wanted to have those moments of joy in there that, we could really show them being kids and getting to have that little bit of fun that modern readers would relate to also. I mean, the 80s were a dark and gritty time for all of us. As a 6-year-old, I could relate with that Power Pack. But in the modern era, I wanted it to be a little brighter and shinier.
Yeah, a little bit of a happier future.
Yeah.
What are you reading right now? Or is there any kind of books or anything that you actually consume now that you enjoy reading?
Yeah, I still read comics. I think that's important. As a comic book writer, it is important to be aware of what is going on in comics. So, I read the majority of the Marvel line. I read a bunch of DC stuff. I read, it's not kid friendly for you Power Pack fans out there, but Saga, by Brian Vaughan is a masterpiece. And there are so many good comics out there, that just walking into a comic shop and picking something random off the table, you're likely to find something fun that you like, and that's the great part. I don't have nearly as much time as I would like to sit down and read actual books of late because we're getting ready for a new baby. And I'm writing a bunch of projects and I'm working on some video game stuff. A lot of my research these days is video game related, playing through games and following narratives through those, where it's not actually reading, but it's studying story structure. So, that's another part of my job. I create content for Marvel Future Fight, which is a mobile game, as well as some upcoming video game projects that haven't been announced yet. And so, immersing myself in whatever kind of project I'm working on is really important. I've been reading a lot of Star Wars stuff lately, Star Wars novelizations and tie-ins and expanded, right. It's not called the expanded universe anymore, but the canon novels and comic tie-ins, because I'm working on an upcoming Star Wars project.
Ooh, cool.
So a lot of that kind of stuff, just making sure that I'm immersed in whatever I'm writing.
Cool. Thank you very much. My daughter participates in our show by providing the sound effects, Katie's voice, and her own reviews on our book. And we'd like to hop her on the line so she can ask you some questions, for the kids' perspective.
Awesome.
My name's Carrie. I'm 8 years old, and my daddy said a lot about what I was going to say.
Hi, Carrie.
Do you have a family? Do you have kids? Do you have a wife yet?
Yeah, I do. I'm married, and I have a daughter. Her name is Charlie, and she's 4.5 years old. She's going to turn 5 in April. And then we are expecting a new baby, a boy, who is going to be arriving in March. So I'm about to be a father of 2, which is really, really exciting.
How do you feel writing these books? Do you enjoy writing these books?
I love writing Power Pack. There was a part of writing Power Pack for me was like going back to being a kid again, getting to think about the adventures that I used to have when I was younger with my best friends and all the cool things we'd do together. And I'd put all of those things together and mash them up and try to make a fun story for these kids to go out. And then I'd add some supervillains to the mix too, because we didn't have a lot of those in my neighborhood. But we figured since it's the Marvel Universe, we should add some. But it was just so much fun to get to tell stories about these kids.
Carrie, what stories or what kind of characters do you like to talk about and play with?
DC superheroes.
Nice. Yeah, my daughter is a big fan of the DC superhero girl stuff. She loves it.
Me too. Who's your daughter's favorite?
Right now, she really loves from the DC side. She really loves Supergirl and Batgirl. From the Marvel side, she really likes Ms. Marvel. And she likes Spider-Gwen because we went to go see Into the Spider-Verse together, and she thought it was amazing. I did too.
I like how you made kids sound in these books. How did you do that?
Well, the real secret is that I never grew up. I still think like a kid, and so it was a matter of trying to think of how I would have said something if I were younger. Before maybe I knew the big words. I had all the experiences I had. If I were in that situation and I were a little bit younger, what would I have thought of? How would I have said it? How would I have reacted? And then I also, I try to hang out with as many kids as I can. I got nieces. I've got, lots of people around me who know young kids or have young kids in their family. And I just get to listen to them and I get to hear how they talk. And I get to try to use that in my writing to make sure that the kids sound like kids. It's not easy to do, but it's fun to try to pick up on how kids talk and use it in those scripts.
Yeah.
Thank you for the answer.
No problem.
We got one more question.
Who is your favorite member of Power Pack?
Oh, I love them all. It's so hard to choose. But, I have a real soft spot for Jack. I don't know why. As adorable as Katie is and as smart as Julie is and as strong and quick as Alex is, even though Jack's the troublemaker, I always root for him. I know he's going to do the right thing eventually, and I want him to get there, and I want him to figure out how to do the right thing. And so I'm always cheering for Jack. So that is probably my favorite because I know Alex is going to do the right thing. I'm pretty sure that Julie's going to do the right thing. I'm almost certain Katie's going to do the right thing. But Jack, there's always a little bit of a question, and it's always a big relief for me when I get to the end of writing the story that I figured out why Jack decided to do it. And so for me, I think there was the most joy in Jack's journey through the series.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Carrie.
Thank you, Carrie. I'm proud that I can get her to talk to a microphone. I think
that's awesome, man.
She does a lot better in person, but I'm trying my best with her.
Oh, it's great. It's great.
Keeping her in the... She actually does enjoy doing this. It's not me twisting her arm too. She loves telling people, I'm on a podcast with my daddy and I get to read these books. And
That's so cool. Oh, it's so nice that you get to do it together. It's funny, because I'm kind of like you said, you don't twist her arm. I'm the same way with my kid. I'm immersed in comic culture and pop culture all the time, and I have a lot of friends who raise their kids to like what they like, and who they take their kids to the comic conventions and they dress up together as a family, and that's great if that's what you want to do. That's fine. But they've always said, "Oh, she's got to be so into Marvel," and my answer is always, "No, not really."
No, not really.
What she really loves, I mean, she likes Marvel. She thinks it's cool, but what she really loves are these 6 or 7 other properties that she's chosen as her own. And I'm fine with that. My parents didn't force me to read comics when I was a kid. I found them on my own, and I continued to love them, and they continued to support my love of them. I'm going to do the same thing for her. And if she finds her way to the characters that I write eventually and decides she likes them, awesome. And if she doesn't, that's cool too. She can find her own thing. She's wrong, but she can find her own thing.
I have no problem at all going to the comic book store with my daughter, telling her to go over. I will buy her one comic book every time we go to the store. She goes to the all ages section. She picks out something she wants to read. That's fine. I'm not going to tell her which one she's got to read. The OCD part of me is like, well, you've got to get them all. You've got to get them in the series. But no, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, I don't want to hand over my collector gene to her. That's the
no.
Yeah.
That way lies no money, but
and no shelf space.
Shelf space, and yeah. Let's go ahead. We got just a little bit of time left. Let me go ahead and get these through really quickly. Yeah. We asked some questions from our followers, and we did get something back from Tim Price, who is one of our biggest fans, and he's actually a big podcasting fan in general, but he's a great guy.
Yeah, he interacts with the show a lot, and that's really amazing. In fact, he did the voice of Mephisto for us.
Nice.
When we did our own crossover event of the 4 issues of Mephisto Versus.
Beautiful.
And we comboed up with other podcasts and did those. So.
Yeah, we threw it out. We're like, we've got an idea. We're going to do this, 4-issue thing with, 3 other podcasts. Anybody want to, what podcast want to be involved with it? Who wants to be involved? And Tim Price is like, I'm not on a podcast, but I'll do something. And then without ever hearing him or talking to him, I said, okay, you're Mephisto's voice. Send us some voice samples. And he was perfect.
That's awesome.
Were there any team-ups that you did not get to do, but you wanted to do?
Oh, yeah, of course. Punisher and Power Pack was the one that I wanted to do that we never got to do. And I can't say I ever wrote a pitch for it per se. Like, I don't know what would have happened during it, but I wanted to do it. Like, that to me would have been, because once we got into the routine of okay, we're doing a Hero plus Power Pack. We did Avengers, we did X-Men, we did Spider-Man, we did Hulk, and we started going down the line. And every time I'd throw out Punisher because I just thought it would be hilarious. And hey, if Archie could have done it, the Power Pack could have done it.
Yeah, it's canon.
And I wanted to find a unique, fun story to tell that would have challenged me to write Punisher in an all-ages comic and Power Pack in a much darker situation in this particular iteration. And I thought, man, that could be not just ridiculous, but actually pretty cool. But it never materialized. For probably logical reasons.
I want you to spitball that and send it our way.
Yeah.
It doesn't even have to go anywhere.
We won't show it to anybody. We won't show it to anybody. You did read the Infinity Warp's Punisher and Power Pack?
Yes, I was very excited about that. I that made me smile very big because it was almost like my wish came true.
Yes. I thought that was a fantastic introduction. I want to see the rest of that story.
Yes. Absolutely.
Because this is something we struggle with, we agree with this question from Tim. How do you pronounce Kofi? Coffee?
I pronounce it Kofi, like Kofi Annan. That's how I pronounce it. I don't know if that's right. I've never heard. My gauge is usually how does Stan Lee pronounce it in an interview, and that's the right one, unless it's Annihilus, because I have heard him say Annihilus in an interview, and I believe he pronounced it Annihilus, which I think was a Woody Allen movie. But usually Stan's pronunciation is the one that I say, okay, that's it. But I've never heard him say this one. But so I go with Kofi. It could be coffee, but it looks like Kofi to me as it's written.
We've been going with
That's
Kofi.
what I go with.
Yeah, we've been going with Kofi.
That's going to have to be a question for Louise.
And trust me, I am trying to nail her down for an interview.
I think the entirety of our interview with her is going to be, how do you say this name? How do you say this name?
What were you thinking here? This is the far left field question, and I think Tim might. I'm not sure why Tim asked this, but we're gonna go with it. What's your favorite flavor of cheese?
I am a connoisseur of delicious cheeses and cheese stuffs, but I always go back to a nice sharp cheddar. And I mean like real sharp, like sharp it could cut your tongue sharp.
Okay.
We're talking like a nice, aged Gloucester or something like that. It's got a cheddary vibe, but really has that calcium crystal in it that kind of cracks as you sink your teeth through it. Crumbles, not that homogenized cheddar you get from like a cheese board, but like crumbly and flaky. That's the good stuff. And I think way too much about this, apparently, because I have a very extensive answer about my favorite cheese.
I think for our next podcast, we're going to start a cheese cast, and we're just going to
cheeses of the Marvel Universe.
Yeah, cheeses of the Marvel Universe.
You can try 616 different cheeses.
Yeah, it's matching cheeses with heroes. I think Captain America's.
I love it.
Yeah, I think.
Yeah,
Captain America is going to be a provolone.
No, Cap is just Kraft Singles, man.
Okay. American
wow.
cheese. There you go. Perfect.
I was trying to think of what is the American cheese.
You don't get more American than the processed cheese stuff.
Yeah,
that is immensely true. And processed, like Steve. So
yeah. And I mean, like U.S. Agent is like a can of whiz.
Yeah.
He's kind of as good as Steve, but not quite. A little bit fake tasting.
Would Deadpool be Swiss just because he's usually full of holes?
Probably, yeah.
Okay.
No, or a little bit. You'd have to find something a little bit moldy for Deadpool.
Yeah.
Based on his skin conditions, you'd probably have to find something with a little bit of funk to it.
It's going to be an old blue cheese.
Yeah.
What's a good Canadian cheese for Wolverine?
I don't know. I just want to say pepper jack because that's my favorite. My response for things is always like, well, what do I like? That's going to be my answer.
All right, we're running low on time, so let's go ahead and ask we'll do this last one here.
So, Mark, what advice do you give to children that want to become writers?
First and foremost, read. I was an avid reader as a kid. I absorbed everything I could get my hands on, not just comics, but books and everything that I could find. And the basis of understanding how a story is structured comes from reading stories. You don't know how to write a story if you haven't read a story. And it's great to have ideas, but unless you know how to execute them, you don't have a chance. And I know so many kids who say, I want to work in comics and I want to write comics. And I say, well, what kind of stuff do you like to read? And they go, I don't really read. And I go, whoa, that's a problem. Mm-hmm. Because without that, there's no transition from one to the other. But also, make your own stuff. Make up your stories. I started making my own comics when I was probably 4 or 5 years old. Started drawing them. They're terrible. I have them in a folder somewhere upstairs. But they're my first attempts at making a comic, and then those got better. And in high school, my best friend and I used to ignore our AP biology teacher and draw comics in the back of the classroom. We still both got A's somehow, but we created our own storylines there, and then that fell over into college where we started our own website and we're publishing our own characters online in the early days of the internet. Like I'm talking hosted by AOL days of the internet.
Oh, yeah.
And that, was probably making my own stuff was probably the reason that when I applied to be an intern at Marvel, they chose me other than the random, 30 other kids on the stack of resumes, is because I was probably the one that was actually actively trying to make my own comics, even if they weren't any good. And then from there, it went on to a career, so making my own stuff was the beginning of making this stuff for a living.
Well, speaking of stuff that you're working on, are you working on anything now, or do you have anything that you would like to plug?
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm the content writer for Marvel Future Fight, which is a popular mobile game for iOS and Android, so you can get it on your phone or your tablet. Mm-hmm. And we create all kinds of cool new stuff for that. New batch of content that involves Captain Marvel that ties into the upcoming movie just came out, and we've got a lot more to come this year. That's going to be lots of fun. I just had a book come out through Becker and Mayer. It is a survival handbook. So it's everything you need to know to survive virtually any situation in the wilderness, from a bear attack to poison ivy to forest fires and so on. And that was a lot of fun to write because it was outside of my normal wheelhouse of writing comics and pop culture stuff. I'm also going to be working on, it was just announced recently that I'm going to be working on a cookbook with a chef that is going to be tied into the Star Wars Galaxy's Edge land in both Disneyland and Disney World, the new section of the park. We're going to be writing the official cookbook that ties in to that area that is coming out this fall.
Nice.
Well, there's some stuff that ties into, I'm writing a book for Back to the Future. I'm writing a Ghostbusters project. Lots of cool stuff, and I've got some more video game stuff that should be coming up in announcements over the course of the summer. That should be, so people should keep their eye on my website, sumerak.com, if they want to find out more about that.
Well, it sounds like you are doing a eclectic variety of amazing things that each one seems like they would be a lot of work and effort. So
and also you are going to be producing your own child too.
Yes.
So there you go.
Yes. So somehow I'm going to have to figure out how to do all those things at once, which is going to be interesting, but it's worth it.
Well, you've mastered typing and changing a diaper at the same time, right?
I have. Yep, one with each hand.
Excellent.
Well, that's why you have the.
Sometimes I accidentally type on the baby, which is not a.
Wife
well, that's
not
why you
happy.
Type on the baby and put a diaper on the computer, which is not good.
That I wouldn't like to send that in for the editor. You might get some bad notes back from the editor on that one.
Yeah, Mark, we want to talk about this current draft that you sent in. It is a small child that's screaming.
It kind of stinks a little bit.
Yeah.
It kind of stinks.
Yeah.
Mark, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate this. We love what you've done with the series. We love what you've given to us and the rest of the community. Thank you so much for doing that. Thank you so much for spending time with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much for your time and everything you've done.
We really do appreciate it. This is
my pleasure, guys.
This is outwardly for us and absolutely amazing that the creators of the stuff that we enjoy are willing to spend an hour or two with us talking about what they've done on our silly little show. So we really, really do appreciate it.
Well, you know what? We appreciate you being out there and spreading the good word and loving this stuff. We do this because we love it, and we're glad to know that other people love it too. So it makes my day being a part of something like this, and I appreciate you having me on. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate it.
Shout out time. We would like to recognize those listeners that take the time to write in or leave us a review.
On Facebook, Cullen Stapleton,
Keith Baker,
Jeff Pollier,
Jeremy Daw,
Max Trevor,
Cindy Heineken? I know her.
I think I've met her before. Isn't she related to...
My daughter.
Your daughter?
Yes.
That's right.
Pat Sampson,
Hoover Jeremiah,
Al Sedano,
Virginia Taylor.
Mitch Gillian.
And speaking of Mitch Gillian, have I mentioned that if you are in Portland, Oregon, you should go to the Nerd Out. It is our city's premier geek bar. It's awesome.
And now for Twitter shoutouts. Tim Price.
Thank you, Tim Price, for your questions that we used this episode. And now you have your answer about cheese.
Mark was very, very vocal about his cheese likes and his feeling on cheeses that the Marvel superheroes would enjoy, what their preferences would be.
I'm thinking that is going to be a thing in of itself.
I think it really could be. Sailor Bear Zodar.
Jeremy Daw.
Craig McNichol.
Warlock Thanos Podcast.
Cannonball.
Rustin LF.
Alexander, who informed us that the monkey we were trying to think of was the Capuchin monkey, named after the monks that inspired the coffee.
Comics in the Golden Age.
Coffee is good, Mal.
Land Monkey.
Limax 7.
And Charles Gears, who asked what presents the Power Kids received for Christmas that year. Now, since it's being 1985 and their mom is in the hospital for like 3 months, hang on, I think I got something here. Try this out. First, I think Grandpa came through in style. I think he knows his grandkids and told Jim not to worry about it. He got the presents. For Katie, being the youngest, My Little Ponies and a new bassoon. He remembered she actually tried doing this bassoon and that one time when they went to the aquarium, and she really liked it before, the bassoon got destroyed. So when he got new, he got this great 2-for-1 deal at the music store and got her own. Jack, Transformer Toys, because that was the in thing at the time, and Jack was probably getting all of the Decepticons. Julie, well, books. Books. Dragons of Spring Dawning was out about then and was pretty big. Also, Gramps noticed that Julie was a little more into sci-fi, so he may have picked up Ender's Game. Alex.
What do you think Alex got?
I'm thinking Alex may have gotten just a book on dictatorship.
Maybe he got, the constructor set? Or maybe a home...
Chemistry set?
Chemistry set, yeah.
Home chemistry set, yeah. Yeah, he may have also gotten a bunch of new binders, too.
Oh, a bunch of binders?
Yeah, because he had written I Love Allison on him, and, Allison's probably going to dump him real soon.
Probably. Pretty quick, yeah. Sharpies and new binders. Yeah. Socks. Something sensible.
Something sensible.
Yeah. Socks and a nice hat.
Be sure to check out another show that I'm currently working on, Rick Meets the Legion. Nicholas Prom guides me through decades of old DC comics while we drink. You can find the show on the Comic Reflections podcast. Just look up Comic Reflections wherever you find podcasts. Listen to me drink on another show.
Because we need more of that.
Once again, before we leave, just a big thank you to Marc Sumerak for his time, letting us interview him on our show, and just being a great guy. We had a lot of fun talking to him. It was a perfect day because we had a snow day here, so my daughter was actually available to help us out with the recording, which was kind of nice surprise, but it was really nice to be able to do that.
It really was. He was a great sport about it, and really informative and really nice. It was very kind of him to spend the time with us that he did. We really do appreciate it. We are Jeff and Rick Present, and we record and self-produce our podcast in Portland, Oregon. If you'd like to talk to us, you can do so through Twitter at Jeff Rick Present, our Facebook page, Jeff and Rick Present, our email address, Jeff and Rick Present, all one word, at gmail.com, or at our website, jeffandrickpresent.wordpress.com.
Please rate and review us on iTunes or Stitcher. This will help other people find us.
And as always, we want to thank the wonderful women in our lives.
My wife Cindy and our daughter Carrie.
My fiancée Hillary and our daughter Aurora.
We love you.
Until next time.
Costumes off.
Our theme music is 80s Action. Also featured in this episode is Blipstream. All music is by Kevin MacLeod at Incompetech.com and is licensed under Creative Commons by Attribution 3.0 license.
Oh, how's your cold?
It's a little bit better. I'm at the tail end of it. Thanks.
Okay, good. Yeah, I know this season has just been rough with colds where it was like, oh, I've got something. Okay, it's starting to go. No, it's back.
Yeah,
okay, it's going. No, it's still here.
Yeah, my daughter brought it home from preschool, and then it eventually, after nights of holding her, through the evening, then it transferred to me. So
yeah, I got a 1.5-year-old, so gotcha. I hear that. It's like, hey, let's go to the library, and then let's play with kids that are quote unquote teething.
Yep, and then let's have a cold for 7 weeks.
You've got a new one coming up too, don't you?
Yeah, in like 3 weeks. So it's an exciting new adventure.
Yes, it is. Congratulations on that. Well, it's one that you've done before, so you got a little bit of experience.
Right. We got just two more to make our own path. So we're good.
The next thing, of course, is choosing out which powers they get, and then making sure that they understand the importance of unstable molecule clothing, because that just saves you the cleaning up effort afterwards.
Oh, and no more clothes shopping.
I'm pretty sure my daughter is just going to go the way of Alex during his New Warriors era and just take all the powers for herself. I'm pretty sure that's how she's going to do it.
Well, this one's mine, and this one's mine, and that one's mine too.
I am the oldest, therefore they all are mine.
Yeah, sorry.
We found out June Brigman owned 8 cats.
10
cats.
10
cats.
Yeah.
Which that was an
entire
line of questioning right from that, and that came from my daughter's question. Yeah. So it was like, excellent.
We have some stuff we want to ask you. I have 10 cats. We have some different stuff we want to ask you.
You need to explain this. 10 cats.
What powers do those cats have?
Besides multiplication.
Yeah.
I wrote the series, but Franklin was around long before us. I just don't want to give the wrong impression that I had anything to do with creating the characters.
I was under the impression you created Marvel Comics.
I did. It was me and Jack Kirby.
Yeah. And then you brought in a young intern named Stanley.
Yeah, back during the war, and then he took everything from me. And then I time traveled, and here I am today.
If you look really closely at some of the patents, you are due a lot of money.
Yeah.
I really hope you guys don't sue us or mind that we are using them as our cold opens.
Oh no! I mean, I have nothing to do with suing anybody. That's in Marvel's hands, and I'm not going to tell them anything. I don't stick the lawyers on anyone unless it's like blatantly bootleg material, and then I drop a note, and I'm like, "Did you see this awful shirt that somebody made that's misusing your characters? You really ought to take that down." And then they do.
Going you to the We Are Jeff.
We are Jeff.